friends, her husband murdered his wife, stuffed her in the closet. I am true crime. I mean, if you would really open the book to my life, it would be a lot of true crime. So, that's kind of why I picked that name, All True Crime, because that's my life. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people don't really understand it that way, but trust me, it is my life. But tonight on this channel, we are going to be reading 10 scary stories. 10 scary stories. So, get yourself something to drink. Get yourself something to eat. Get yourself nice and comfortable. And sit back, relax, and enjoy. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this content. Please, it really helps the channel a lot. I know a lot of people just come watch content, but it is free for you to join. And I mean, it doesn't cost you anything. And if you don't like me, you can unsubscribe. It's not, it's not written in blood, okay? This is, only true stories and crime and all that stuff, all that is. So it is not really, I'm not gonna come get you, I promise, if you unsubscribe. I completely understand. Okay, well, tonight, in our true scary story reading, we are going to be doing Fragments of Fear, okay, by Michael Kelso, or you can find him on Reddit, and it is, or u/writer_1717. So you can catch him there for sure. The call. Heavy breathing. I don't think anybody likes to hear heavy breathing, do they? On the phone, on the other line. Has that ever happened to you? Thomas said, smiling. They break up my otherwise dreary day. You mean the thrill a minute world of a customer service representative isn't enough for you? Thomas smiled. Now you're just teasing me, he said. Just a little, dear. I don't know about you, but she sounds a little creepy to me. Just saying. I wouldn't mind a little excitement once in a while. Be careful what you wish for, she said. Excitement can come in many different forms. Very true. Anything would be better than answering phones all day. Well, at least you have someone to talk to. Your daughter hasn't brought the grandkids by for a visit. No, not for a while. Oh, that's a shame. Yes, but I've decided I'm not going to let it get me down. Good for you. I'm going on a trip. Wonderful. Where are you going? Somewhere far, far away. Oh, sounds mysterious. Well, you could come with me. What do you mean? You said you wanted an adventure. She said, it would be nice to have someone with me for a long journey. Are you serious? Dead serious. That's a very generous offer, Mrs. Greenwood, but it's against company policy to accept gifts from customers. I understand. Maybe I should take your order. That will be fine, dear. So what can I help you with today, ma'am? You sound so official, she chuckled. I want to order a large bouquet of flowers. Alright, which ones? Lilies in a funeral arrangement. Oh, I'm sorry. Who passed away? Someone very close to me. Oh. Well, my condolences, Mrs. Greenwood. Thank you, dear. Would you like me to use your credit card that's on file? That would be fine. Alright, let me just type that in. Oh, it says your credit card was declined. Well, that's odd. You haven't spent over your limit, have you? I haven't used it since the last time I talked to you. Do you have the card with you? Not at the moment. Why? I just wanted to make sure it hadn't been stolen. Who would do such a thing? There's some evil people out there. Oh, I know. Keep belching. Can I put you on hold for a minute to see if I can straighten this out? Certainly, dear. Thomas switched lines, calling his supervisor. This is Bob. How can I help you? Bob, it's Thomas. I have Mrs. Greenwood on the line, but there's a problem with her credit card. Could you run it through the fraud protection to make sure no one is stealing from her? Sure, just give me just a second. Keys cackled as he searched for the information. After a few minutes, he said, it says here that her card was deactivated. To give her a reason. Let me see. called. Now why? Are you sure it's her? Of course, she's my best customer. We chat every time she calls him. But are you absolutely sure it's her? I'm 100% sure it is her. I'm 100% sure it is her. Why? Because it says here that, well, she's what? Deceased. What? It says she died last week, apparently committed suicide. Thomas shook all over. Thomas, are you there? Bob said. Yeah, he said quietly. It must be some kind of thief trying to get her money. Probably read her obituary. It happens a lot. There's some evil people in this world. Yeah, Thomas said quietly. I'll get rid of the collar. Thomas disconnected with Bob and sat still in his chair, thinking about what he had just heard. His hand shook when he clicked the button to reconnect the call. This is Greenwood. Ah, there you are, dear. Did you find anything out? Well, more than I thought I would. Oh, how so? When was the last time you used your card? I really can't remember. Did you use it on your trip? She chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly sound. It sent chills down Thomas's spine. I'm on my trip now, and I have no need for a credit card. Why not? Oh, I think you know why, she said. Tell me anyway. I invited you along, but you didn't tell you. It was a choice. Thomas stiffened. I'm not going anywhere. She chuckled again, but as she did, her voice changed. It became deeper and more gravelly. It became the menacing voice of the first caller. I told you to be careful what you wished for. What you wished for. He did warn him. That was story number 111. The call. That was called The Call. Worse than the disease. I need that antidote. The general growled on the screen. Millions of lives are at stake. I'm trying, General, Dr. Matt Rogers said, but you constantly calling and screaming at me isn't helping my focus. His focus. Focus, how long do you need to focus? You've been at this for weeks, every day throwing thousands of people, well, every day thousands of people die. If you do not focus soon, there won't be anyone left to rescue or to cure. You see that right there, Matt said. That does not help me. That does not help me. I am trying as hard as I can. I don't go anywhere except this lab. I sleep, I eat, I drink, occasionally shower here. I'm putting 1000% effort into finding a cure. Just leave me alone and let me do it. Matt clicked the disconnect on the uplink as the general's face turned mixtures started to bubble. Yes, he said, watching the chemical reaction. Then the bubbling increased more rapidly. It expanded quickly until it overflowed the test tube. No, Matt cried. As the chemicals spilled into the sink, he rinsed out the tubes and set them in the dish tray to dry, then collapsed into the chair in front of his computer. Trial number 302 was an utter fail. He said into the microphone, "The reaction speed is too rapid. I need to introduce more inhibitors. He shut the recorder off and leaned back into his chair. He didn't remember the last time he had slept, and he didn't remember falling asleep this time either. It was dark out, even though his watch said 1:03 p.m. The sky was angry gray and the clouds swirled ominously. He double-checked his gas mask to make sure there was a tight seal. A tight seal. It was dangerous to be out for more than 15 minutes, but this was too important. He walked to the crest of the hill and looked over the barren landscape. In the background, he could see the cooling towers of the nuclear power plant. Smoke always rose from them nowadays. Solar panels no longer worked because no sun got through to the surface. Coal mines had been abandoned because it was too dangerous to work in them with the disease present. Oil rigs had been abandoned as well. It sounds kind of familiar, even though it was written almost 10 years ago. The world had become a dark and dangerous place since the onset of the disease. 8 billion people had died. Bodies were everywhere. The Department of Sanitation was doing its best to dispose of them, but being understaffed and more people dying every day made it more than an uphill battle. It was nearly vertical. He was the only hope left for humanity, and all the other scientists working on a cure had succumbed to the illness. This was now or never time. A cure would be a Hail Mary pass from his own end zone. Failure meant extinction. Not only just extinction of himself, but of the human race, apparently. As he surveyed the tattered remnants of what used to be modern life, he saw another survivor. It had been years since he had seen another person. Even people he talked to on the computer link had whittled down to a chosen few. The survivor approached. The survivor approached, apprehensive. Apprehension gnawed at the back of his mind. What did they want? What did they want? Why weren't they afraid? That was my first question. Could it be one of the bandits that roamed the land, scavenging every scrap they could from both the dead and living? As the survivor stopped 6 feet away, he recognized her. She was the reason he kept going. She was his inspiration. It was the first time he had seen her other than on a computer screen. Even dressed in a heavy jacket and a gas mask, he saw her as the most beautiful person in the world. He reached behind him and pulled out a plastic bag containing a rose he had grown over the last year in his lab. He pulled it out of the bag and handed it to her. She looked down at the perfect beauty of it and smiled. The smile disappeared as the rose began to wilt. Within moments it was completely dead. He was devastated that he had disappointed her. She reached over and touched his mask. He looked up and saw her smile. He smiled back as he pulled off his mask, and she pulled off hers. They kissed for the first time and last time as they collapsed to the ground, gasping their last breaths together. Matt woke with a start and a hard on. He looked over at his computer. In the lower left corner was a counter that read 3,790,217, and the number was steadily increasing. He looked away from the infection count and started working on the next formula. It may have been a dream, but not for long if I don't find a cure. He worked desperately for another hour. The dream had given him the motivation to work even harder. He was just about to test the next batch when he was startled by a strange sound. Hello. Hello. He never had a visitor. The general provided him with his supply by having people drop them off at the lab. But he pressed a button on the computer screen. Security breach. Command Alpha Theta full lockdown. He reached into the drawer and pulled out his sidearm. Anybody down there? The intruder said. Matt took cover behind a bookshelf as he waited for a gunshot. Matt, the intruder said. Matt tapped his watch and said, General, I need an evac. I've been compromised. I have an intruder who knows my name. All he heard on his watch was static. Mayday, mayday, I need any friendlies to Delta Echo Lab. The intruder looked around and spotted him. Oh, hey, Matt, he said. How is it going? Who are you? Matt said, aiming the gun in his chest. It's me, the intruder said. You know Kevin, your classmate from school. What's your security clearance? Did the general send you? No, I don't have a security clearance. I don't know any generals. Have you come to steal the formula? Kevin glanced at the blank computer screen. No, I'm not here for any formula. Matt quickly closed the laptop. I don't believe you, Matt said. You're trying to steal all my hard work. Who are you working for? The Russians, the Chinese? No, I work for Walmart. You know that. So the Chinese, they won't get it. I won't let them. Matt squeezed the trigger and the gun went off. Kevin stood there in shock. What are you doing? Matt fired again and again, but Kevin didn't move. You must be wearing a bulletproof vest. No, I'm not, Kevin said, grabbing the gun. Listen to me. seen you before in my life, Matt said. Even if I can't shoot you, the general is on his way and you'll be tried for high treason. Matt, Kevin said softly, none of that is real. Don't you remember? We've been friends since grade school. Grade school. What? We were on lockdown because of the coronavirus. But that's been over months ago. I understand, Matt said. You do. You're trying to trick me into stopping my research. No, Matt. You're not a scientist. You're a junior in high school. Lies. The general said they tried to brainwash me. There is no general. There is no brainwash. There is no research. Matt, are you okay? Kevin sighed. Okay, man. You got me. I'm leaving before the general comes to arrest me. Kevin trudged up the stairs into the kitchen, but he barely made it through the door until it slammed shut. Kevin stared at the door for a moment. I'm sorry you saw him that way, Matt's mother said. How did he get like this? That lockdown thing. He just crept into his own mind and never came out. Never came out. Haven't you been able to get him to a doctor? We've tried, but the healthcare system is backed up with the whole coronavirus thing. Someone who poses no physical danger to himself or others is low priority. Low priority. Kevin looked at the gun in his hand, then handed it to Matt's mom. I'll need to get that back in his drawer when I go down to restock his supplies. Don't forget the baking soda and vinegar. Matt's dad said. He gets upset when his experiments don't react. Number 3. Story number 3. Story number 3. I was startled awake by a sound. My hazy mind tried to rack awake and drag it down and identify it. I sat up in the dark room waiting for my eyes to adjust. The sound continued. It wasn't just a dream or the remnants of a dream. It was rhythmic and mechanical. I rose and started towards using my cell phone as a makeshift flashlight. As I stepped closer to my desk, I realized it was my printer. It finished printing out a page and went back into sleep mode. I wish I could go back to sleep that easily, but now I'm awake and I have a minor mystery to solve. I pulled the sheet of paper out and stared at it. Using my phone for light, all I could see were a few smudges. I padded over to the door and turned on the overhead light, blinking hard as my eyes adjusted. There are times when I wish I wasn't so curious. into sleep mode. I wish I could go back to sleep that easily, but now I'm awake and have a minor mystery to solve. I pulled a sheet of paper out and stared at it using my phone for light. All I could see were a few smudges. I padded over to the door and turned on the overhead light, blinking hard as my eyes adjusted. I pulled. There are times when I wish I was not so curious. Times when I wish I would let things go. I could have shrugged this off as a printer malfunction and gone back to bed. Yeah, but that would have been much better. I would have actually gotten a few more hours of sleep then. But once I saw what was on the paper, halftime was over. I lunged for my bed to stand, ripped open the drawer and grabbed my pistol. I pulled the slide halfway back to make sure there was a round in the chamber and held my phone in front of me for light. With the pistol in my right hand, I crept out of my bedroom, checking corners as I went. I searched one room at a time, keeping an ear open for any sound. I cleared the bathroom, the hallway, living room, and the kitchen of my small apartment. Nothing. I checked the front door, and I found the deadbolt still locked with no traces of tampering. Feeling dazed and a little more than confused, I turned back towards the bedroom when I caught a glimpse of the glass doors that led to the balcony. I raised my gun and started toward the door. The moon was shining bright outside, giving the curtains an eerie glow. When I pulled them back, bathed the room in moonlight. This door was also locked, with no sign of tampering. I sighed and chided myself for overreacting and having an overactive imagination when I saw something on the door. It was five fingerprints, like someone had pressed their hand to the glass. I held up the paper from my printer to the glass, and the two sets of prints matched in size and spacing. A chill ran through me as I realized the prints were on the inside of the glass. I took a big else would he be? Just check. Okay. He put the phone down, none too lightly, and I could hear him shamble away. I heard a door opening and a drawer being pulled out. Then I heard a muffle, "Oh my God," and fast footsteps returned. "Detective, I don't know how, but he's gone." "What?" "He was scheduled to." No. I heard the phone drop, sounds of a struggle, and the man screaming. There was silence, an awful silence. I jumped to my feet and was about to run out when I heard laughter on the phone. "Dude, did I get you?" "What?" "Did you fall for it?" Joe said. I slammed the phone down so hard it bounced. I had to think this couldn't be real. Something else was happening. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let my thoughts drift back into time. Thomas Eugene Colsolo was executed by lethal injection 2 days ago. I didn't squeeze the syringe, but I did everything I could to make sure he got what he was coming to him. He knew it too. As I sat there in the observatory, he glared at me the entire time. He didn't do anything as obvious as yell at me or threaten me. But those cold eyes never left mine. I didn't care. Good riddance as far as I was concerned. He had left a trail of bodies from the West Coast to Larson, where I finally caught him. Even during his interrogation, he showed no remorse. He babbled on about being some sort of god. Then why doesn't your deity conjure yourself out of prison? I asked. His response was the same cold stare that he gave me up until the moment he died. There had never been any evidence of an accomplice, so my next logical thought was copycat. Some other sick mind who somehow became inspired by this sick mind. I wondered if mental illness was communicable in some cases. I dug around some more, but kept hitting dead ends. I had a stack of open cases on my desk that needed attention, so I let this drop and went on with my normal day. But on the way home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought new locks for my front door and patio door. Installing them made me feel about 1% better. Something about this just didn't sit well with me. Went to bed and fell into a fitful sleep. I woke up at 3:15 to the sound of my printer. I sprung out of bed with my pistol in my hand and belted out into the living room. I turned on the lights and checked the locks. Neither had been tampered with. The same 5 fingerprints were on the patio door. I hadn't cleaned them off. I grabbed the Windex and took care of that. I cautiously returned to the bedroom, checking the bathroom and closet as well. When I got there, I pulled the paper out of the printer, and sure enough, there were the fingerprints, only they looked different. I finally figured out what it was. There were only 4. The thumbprint was missing. I found it hard to work that day. All I could think about was this stupid prank. Someone was playing on me. Or was it a prank? No, it had to be. That was the only one logical explanation. I called my brother-in-law and lied to him about wanting to go hunting next week so I could borrow his trail cam. I set it up in my bedroom to record any movement myself out of bed, grabbed my gun, and searched the apartment. After finding no one there, I came back to the trail cam, pulled out the memory card, and downloaded it to my computer. It seemed to take ages as I sat staring at the progress bar. When it finally finished, I watched the video playback. It was disturbing seeing everything awash in the ghostly white of the infrared video. I watched myself toss and turn in my sleep in the background as the printer loomed large in the screen. In retrospect, I may have set the camera a little too close to the printer. I watched as the seconds ticked by like drips from a leaky faucet. I felt my attention wane and found the fast forward button. Watching myself toss and turn at high speed made it look like I was in a life and death wrestling match with my blanket. I would have laughed if I wasn't thinking about the very real struggle going on. The image flashed and changed. I stopped it and rewound. Playing at regular speed, something faint moved near the printer before it turned on. 5 seconds later, the video showed me jumping out of bed and tearing out of the room. A minute later, I turned off the video. I rewound and watched it again. It was a faint image, like a whip of smoke that blew over to the printer right before it turned on. I watched it over and over and over again. Sometimes at full speed, sometimes frame by frame. It stayed the same. A slight fizz. Then the printer turned on right when the time read 3:15. I slumped back in my chair. Something was nagging at me. There was something I was missing. I stared at the printer with suspicion, as though it was the witness that was hiding the truth. I ran every diagnostics possible, printed page after page of instruments. I pulled them all out, and everyone showed the printer was working normally. The last page was blank, except for 3 fingerprints. That day at work was a coffee-fueled blur. It's amazing how busy you can make yourself, and when there's something you want to avoid doing. I had no desire to tell anyone about my nightly problem. I had no idea who I would even tell. Any reasonable person I knew would either laugh in my face or give me the number for a good shrink. If someone else had told me this was happening to them, I would have laughed in their face. Then I told them to stop watching scary movies late at night. I was stuck. I couldn't ignore that something was happening, but I couldn't figure it out. What it was. Without stumbling into ludicrous possibilities. I refused to acknowledge the G word. It had to be something else. Someone had figured out a way to get into my apartment, mess with my printer, and leave a dead man's print on my door, all without leaving a trace. Sounds reasonable. My mind was doing flip-flops. I was wound so tight from lack of sleep and abundance of paranoia. I nearly jumped out of my chair when someone slammed the door. Damn it, this bastard was winning. I let him get inside my head, and he was toying with me. was like someone driving a nail into my brain. One hammer blow at a time. The dripping faucet in the kitchen was like the Chinese water torture. It wasn't like me to be passive about facing a problem, especially one of the criminal nature, but I was handcuffed. I had nothing to do and nowhere to go with this. At least not without having a room reserved for me at the mental institution. Somehow I fell asleep in the chair. I laid on an operating room, unable to move. The bright light shone in my face. There was no beeping of machines, no monitors or anything else that suggested my life hung in the balance. As I searched the room, I noticed there was a row of windows near the ceiling. Angry faces stared down at me. The biggest surprise of all was one of them was my face stared back at me with a look of anger, tinged with smug satisfaction. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't move. My eyes darted from one face to the next, silently pleading for help. All I saw was anger. The doctor leaned over and stared into my eyes. I recognized him and tried with every ounce of energy to scream, to speak, to make any sound, to let people know. It was Go Solo. He smiled, but didn't say a word. He looked up at the wall clock that said 3:14 and counted down the seconds as he held the needle ready to press the plunger. I watched in silent fury as the seconds ticked, ticked, ticked relentlessly towards the 12. When it reached, he smiled and I screamed. I sat bolt upright in my chair, reaching instinctively for my arm. No IV, no needle, no operating room. I sat back in my chair and breathed a sigh of relief, not noticing my visible breath. Right away, I shivered and got up to check my thermostat. When I passed the clock, I noticed it read 3:15. I looked over at the patio door. It was frosted over, yet the thermostat read 75 degrees. As I watched, two fingerprints appear on the door. I haven't been back to my apartment since. I feel like a criminal on the run, staying at dingy hotels, trying to avoid being seen. I don't even remember how I got here. I'm not even sure if I locked my apartment door. I'm not sure of anything anymore. There's nothing to investigate. I saw with my own eyes something that should be impossible. Who do I tell about that? Do I go to Madame Carlo's house? Oh, the future, and have her tell me that I'm doomed. Drinking a lot of alcohol seemed to be a reasonable alternative. So here I sit, bottle in hand, watching and waiting reruns of Gilligan's Island at 2 a.m. I ponder on the age-old debate that has never been settled. I go for Marianne. Ginger was too snooty and too full of herself. I had to think of foolish things like that to keep me sane, to keep me from eating a bullet 24 hours later. Cause of death, third-degree burns over the entire body, along with inhalation of toxic fumes, the coroner said into a small recording device. Red lights flashed, bathing the smoke of the still smoldering This guy was a model cop, straight-laced, by the book. What the hell drove him to a dingy dive like this? I'll do a toxicology screen when I get him back to the morgue. But there was definitely alcohol involved. But that's just it. I never saw this guy drink. You never know what skeletons hang in others' closets. The fire marshal said that the fire started in his room. He found a broken bottle of whiskey near the electrical outlet that started the fire. That would explain the intensity of the burns, but not the reason for them. A tox screen will help with that. The coroner found nothing that would explain his unusual behavior. The detectives searched the apartment and found nothing out of the ordinary except for five pieces of paper stacked on the printer. Each paper had a fingerprint on it. He compared them all, and they were the same person, same hand, but each paper had one less print on it. The last one only had a single print. He lined it up with the others and found that it was the middle finger. He took them to the station and had them analyzed. A chill ran down his back when the results came in. They belonged to the mass murderer that had been executed earlier in the month. Detective Krishner shredded the papers without telling anybody about them. Number 4. Grave consequences. Edna climbed the crooked stone pathway once again. The walk wasn't steep, but long and continuously uphill. She had to stop and take a rest at least twice every time she came for a visit. She paused to rest and marveled again at the layout of the place. Never before had she seen a cemetery quite like this one. A tree grew behind each tombstone. The leaves had grown behind each tombstone. The leaves had begun to unfurl in the spring warmth. The sense of renewal was in the air. The earth was giving new life to old things. She wished that she had some of that new life. She gathered her strength and continued the long journey uphill. Finally, she reached the place that she had come to love and hate, her husband's grave. Robert Palmer Edwards. She chuckled at how many times people had asked him if he was the popular singer from the 80s by that name. He would always pretend to be irritated, but deep down, she always suspected he enjoyed the attention. Her smile was tinged with sadness as she realized how much she missed him. Hello, sweetheart. How are things going up here? Are the neighbors behaving? She said, looking at the other stones. Not much has changed in the last year. Jan had her baby, a bouncing baby boy. miss you so badly. It hurts. There are mornings when I wake up and I look over at your side of the bed, thinking you've gone to work. But reality swoops in and snatches hope away from me as I realize you're gone. She lay her head on the stone like a pillow as tears fell onto the marble. I wish you were here. As she rested, the wind picked up and a tree branch touched her cheek. It startled her and made her realize how cold she felt. I should get going, she said, wiping her eyes and struggling to her feet. I love you, sweetheart. Take care of yourself. She hobbled back down the path as the tree limbs waved in the wind. 4 months later, she returned carrying a small plastic vase of flowers. The climb had not gotten any steeper, but it seemed like it had taken more effort. Edna stopped to rest 3 times as she journeyed up the stone path. She cursed her body for being so frail. The sight of Robert's grave renewed her energy to continue. She hid the flowers behind her back as she approached, smiling. Happy anniversary, she said, as she produced the flowers. 49 years we've been married. How many couples can say that anymore? She bent down and sat the vase of flowers in front of the tombstone. When she stood, a twinge in her back nearly doubled her over in pain. This body of mine is not the same as it used to be. She was startled by a noise from behind the tree, her mind filled with images of wild animals and muggers who would prey on a helpless woman. Her urge to run was overcome by the knowledge that there was no one to run to, even if she could. Resigned to her fate, she peeked around the corner to see what had raised a racket. To her great surprise, she found a wicker chair lying on the ground as if it had fallen over. Her eyes searched the cemetery for its owner, but there was not a soul to be seen. I suppose no one will mind if I use this to rest for a while. She pulled the chair over beside Robert's stone and sat. She twisted left and right to settle into a comfortable position. Failing that, she stood and pulled out a few offending twigs that were particularly uncomfortable. When she sat again, she said, that's much better. The warm summer air made her feel sleepy. She leaned back into the chair. Little Robert is toddling all over now, getting into everything and giving Jan a run for her money. She laughed. I told her that it's payback for how much trouble she gave us as a child. She didn't seem very amused. That was last week. I had called her. She hasn't been to visit me since the baby was born. She stared up at the dew glistening off the leaves and felt a teardrop glisten in the corner of her eye. I feel like I am more of a nuisance to them now. They all have their own lives to live, and I'm sitting in a big, empty house gathering dust like a family heirloom on a mantle. After a while, you don't even look at it anymore. You know it's there. You know it's always going to be there. You take it for granted. Tears fell on her lap. I haven't seen Kevin in 3 years, and Morgan won't return my phone calls. Didn't we raise them better than that? Didn't we try to instill some morals and values that made family important? Where did we go wrong? When did the world swoop in and snatch our innocent children from us? She clenched her fist without realizing. I wish I could have fought back. Tell the world that our children aren't for sale, but after you. She took in a steady breath. Oh, Robert, it hurts how much I miss you. How sad it is to have come here for someone who will She hung her head as a leaf fluttered down and landed in her lap. She picked it up and stared at the intricate veins running through it. Another leaf fell, and soon another. Soon her lap was covered with leaves as they rained down on her. She sat back in the chair covered by her blanket of leaves and dreamed of a time when everything was right in her world. Robert had settled into his new job. The kids were doing well in school. And with his higher salary, they were about to pay off the house. All was well. She was beginning to think that nothing bad could happen when one phone call shattered her life. She woke to the harsh reality staring coldly back at her in the form of her husband's gravestone. "I'm tired, Robert. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. I wish I could be with you. I never felt unwanted or unneeded when you were with me. You made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I knew that you would move to heaven and earth. You would move heaven and earth to make me happy." She winced from a pain that was not physical, even though they call it heartache. She rose from her chair and allowed the leaves to fall away. "I love you, sweetheart. Happy anniversary," she said as she trudged back down the hill. 3 months had passed until Edna hobbled back up the hill. She struggled horribly, stopping every 50 feet to rest. When she arrived at the grave, she was relieved and grateful to find the wicker chair was still there. She collapsed into it, gasping for breath. "Hello, sweetheart," she rasped. She sat there for a few minutes with her eyes closed before she spoke again. "I'm done, Robert. This life has nothing left to give me but pain." She opened her eyes and looked up at the few brown leaves that still clung to the branches. She noticed how many of the smaller branches had been broken off. At first, she thought a windstorm had broken them, but none of the other trees in the cemetery had so many broken branches. Strangely, there weren't many branches laying on the ground under the tree either. She looked down at the chair and realized where all the branches had gone. The wind picked up and the blanket of leaves rose into the chair, carried by a small whirlwind. For the first time, she noticed a rough trench had been dug beside Robert's plot. It was about 6 feet long and a few feet deep, but it didn't look like it had been dug with a shovel. She looked up and saw a large branch that had been broken off halfway up. Oddly enough, the end of the branch had dirt on it. She looked at the trench, not with fear, but with longing. "Yes, dear, I'll be right there." She smiled and rose from the chair, then hobbled over and lay down in the trench. The wind picked up again and blew the leaves in the air. Edna watched them and smiled as they settled over her, covering her head like a blanket. The next day, the groundskeeper found her body while he was mowing. The police report had no foul play in their investigation, commented on the peaceful expression on her face. The coroner's report read that she died of natural causes. There was no mention of the roughly dug grave. A year later, Jan stood in front of the 2 graves that stood side by side for her father and mother. She looked down as a single tear fell to the ground. As she turned to leave, she noticed a sapling growing from her mother's gravestone. It was overshadowed by the large oak that grew behind her father's stone. She looked around the graveyard. She had never noticed how many stones were similar. 2 stones side by side with the tree behind each. Many of the trees had grown together, their branches inseparable without destroying both. other side of the machine. I wish I wouldn't have signed up for the overtime, Vera said. Why don't you go home then? I can't. Alvin's working in the shred room, so we came together. I never understood why you married him. He treats you like garbage. You need to go home. Maybe you're... Oh shoot, my books are overflowing. Jean disappeared around the corner of the machine. Yeah, Vera's books were also piling up. She stacked a few, then pulled some mangled ones out. She carried the pile of books over to the trash can to throw them in. Achoo! She sneezed so hard she lost her balance and fell into the cart. The books toppled in on top of her, covering her. Jean came around the edge of the machine. Like I was saying, you can find yourself a better man. But Vera was nowhere to be found. Just then, Alvin came around the corner, pushing an empty trash cart. What do you want? Jean sneered. I came to check on Vera, Alvin said. Where is she? I don't know, but you should be ashamed of yourself for forcing her to come to work in her condition. What? I begged her to stay home and get better, but she insisted on coming. So you say. Okay, whatever. Tell her I checked on her. Alvin started to walk away. The least you could do is take her garbage cart. Jean groused. Alvin looked at her. Then the cart. He shrugged. Okay. Then he pushed the cart along back to the shred room. She must have thrown away a lot of books today, Alvin said to himself. That cart's pretty heavy. He mentally shrugged the thought away as he trudged towards the shred room. The jostling around revived Vera. She woke to suffocating darkness. The books pressing down on her would have been a challenge to move in the best of circumstances. In her weakened condition, it was futile. Panic crushed Vera as hard as the books. Breathing was becoming a problem. The weight of the books blocked out most of her air and also pressed down on her. Her lungs ached for air. White spots appeared before her eyes. She knew she didn't have much time. She mustered enough energy into one blood-curdling scream. The shred room was tremendously loud when the machine was running. In 14 years, Alvin would only think of a handful of times it had been off. Day and night, the metal cutters ground up anything that was fed into it. He remembered the day a trash cart had accidentally fallen in it. It came out the other side in tiny pieces, metal frame and all. As he pushed the cart up to the door, he could hear the thunderous din on the other side. In his more imaginative moods, he thought it sounded like a great dragon roaring for its supper. Alvin smiled as he shook the thought away and donned his earmuffs. He pressed the button to open the door and pushed the cart inside at the same time. Vera screamed. Alvin paused. He waited for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, the automatic door closed behind him. Vera's scream had gone unheard. He struggled to push the cart up the ramp. What did Vera put in this thing? A dead body? He pushed it up to the dumping platform and secured the wheels. Then he stepped over to the safety platform. Many times he had stared into the metal maw of destruction that was the shredder. The thought of falling in always made his blood turn to ice. He pressed the unload button and the cart angled up to empty its contents into the shredder. Alvin watched as the scrapbooks poured out of the cart to meet their violent end in the mouth of the shredder. For a moment he wondered if they felt pain. Then his thoughts were shattered as a foot emerged from the cart. Alvin stared at the foot as if it were unreal. He felt like he had fallen into a sudden daydream. He leaned over the safety rail to inspect the his phantom appendage when it appeared. Reality slapped him across the face. "There's a person in there," it screamed. Alvin climbed over the safety rail and reached towards her. "Hold on, something," he yelled as more of a body was revealed. "Grab my hand." But sickness and suffocation had robbed Vera of consciousness. One might consider it mercy to go to such a grisly and blissful unaware. But the fate was not so kind to Vera. Her eyes fluttered open and stared into the jaws of the unspeakable horror. She screamed from the depths of her soul as she clawed at the books that slid beneath her, trying to fight her way back into the cart. And then she heard the voice of salvation. "Grab my hand." She looked up, and there was Alvin reaching towards her, hanging onto the railing. She flung her hand at his, but her body was still weak from the 1-2 punch of sickness and suffocation. Her hand fell short. "Try again," Alvin screamed, and it fell short. "Keep trying," he bellowed in desperation. She tried over and over again as the book slipped out from under her. She screamed as she began to fall when a hand latched under hers. Alvin had let go of the railing to reach her hand. As they both fell, he failed desperately at the low railing, holding to grandma. He flailed desperately at the low railing to hold on. His fingertips touched the railing, but he could not get a grip. Their eyes locked as they fell into the shredder. The gory discovery was not made until shift change. The forensics team gave up about 5 hours of gathering evidence and ruled it an accident. The company held a day of mourning and went out of their way to install new safety equipment so that a tragedy like this would never happen again. Jean didn't believe it. She went out of her way to tell anyone who would listen that Alvin murdered Vera. The people who would listen grew fewer and fewer, despite being repeatedly told to let it go. Jean refused. She was fired and went to her grave, convinced that she was right. Ending 2. The cart angled up 6 inches, then stopped. The indicator light on the panel flashed red. "Great," Alvin said as he reset the panel and tried again. The light flashed red again. 2 more tries yield the same result. "Fine," Alvin growled. "I'll do it myself." He climbed over the safety rail and wedged himself in between the cart. He grabbed handfuls of defective books and threw them into the shredder. "I wonder if they feel pain," he thought as he reached for more books and came up with a shoe. "What the?" He pulled on the shoe and found a leg. "This ain't good." He grabbed books by the armful and threw them in every direction until it uncovered the rest of the body, and he stopped dead when he saw the face. "Vera!" He began tapping her face. "Vera, honey, it's time to wake up now." As he tapped her face, he noticed how cold it was. He felt for a pulse, but found none. "Vera, come on now, this isn't funny." He struggled to pull her out of the cart and carried her out of the shred room and onto the warehouse floor. He ran around and frantically searching. "Where is it?" Finally spotted the yellow sign that said AED. He gently laid her on the floor and pulled the unit off the wall. He ripped her shirt open and placed the electrodes where they were supposed to go. He pressed the button and waited. "Come on," he told the unit. Analyzing, the unit said in a mechanical voice, "Shock not advised." "What?" Alvin yelled. "What do you mean, shock not advised? Shocker!" He pressed the button again. Analyzing. "Shock not advised." "Damn machine, I'll do it myself." He put his hands on top of each other and started doing chest compressions. "Come on, baby, breathe." "What the hell are you doing?" said a supervisor. "Call 911, Alvin demanded. "Now, just you. Do it." Alvin snapped, causing the supervisor to disappear. 5 minutes later, the paramedics arrived and took over. 6 minutes after that, Vera also no secret that Jean blamed him too. Although he would pass by her machine, he would loudly say to someone beside her, "There he goes." Isn't it amazing that a murderer is allowed to go free like that? Either that or, "I sure miss Vera. I wonder where she's been." Oh, that's right, Alvin murdered her. Jean was told to stop by several people, including management, but she ignored them. One day as Alvin was passing by, Jean made one of her snide remarks. He stopped and looked right at her. "Aw, what's the matter? You gonna shred some crocodile tears for little Vera?" Jean said, like she was talking to a baby. "I'm amazed you still have the nerve to show your face after what you did." Alvin walked over and beat her to within an inch of her life. The police arrested Alvin for aggravated assault. His sentence was reduced when several witnesses testified about Jean's constant tormenting. Some witnesses even said that if they'd been in Alvin's shoes, they would have done it much sooner. Alvin served a year in the local prison. He had a constant stream of letters and visitors. He even took grief therapy classes in jail. The entire month Jean was in the hospital, he did not receive a single call or visitor. Ending number 3. Alvin placed the cart in position all the time, feeling uneasy. He had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Why was the cart so heavy? Why wasn't Vera at her machine? Why does Jean hate me so much? He knew the answer to the last one because Jean and Vera used to be much closer friends until she married Alvin. It also didn't help Jean was a vindictive, hateful gossip. She could not stand to see anyone happy and tried to make everyone else as miserable as her. He locked the cart's wheels and pressed the unload button. He eyed the cart suspiciously as it dumped its cargo into the maw of the metal beast. When a shoe appeared, Alvin was instantly in motion. He slammed his fist down on the emergency stop button and dove on top of the cart. In an instant, everything had clicked into place. The heavy cart, the missing Vera, the shoe. It all flashed into a single moment of clarity. Vera's in there. Alvin shoved books out of the cart as fast as he could, finally finding what he knew he would. "Vera, honey," he said, tapping her face. Her eyes did not open. "Vera, baby, come on. Don't do this," he said, tapping her cheeks a little harder. She still didn't come around. Also, Alvin was so focused on Vera that he didn't notice the books continuing to slide forward to the edge. They were riding the avalanche of books to their doom. He tried to pin her in the cart, but she slid out from under him and fell towards the grinder. The shutdown cycle took 2 minutes, and the shredding wheels kept turning even as they slowed down. Alvin launched himself after her and managed to grab her hand. She dangled precariously inches from the still-moving shred wheels. "If I can hold her here long enough for the shutdown," but his hand was slick with sweat, and she slipped out of his grip. "No!" Alvin yelled as he watched his wife fall to a certain doom. In desperation, he dove in after her. The fall was only 9 feet, but Alvin hit it like a ton of bricks. It knocked the wind out of him screamed in pain. It was enough to wake Vera. What's going on? She said groggily. It was then that she looked at her surrounding and started to scream. She tried to free herself from whatever was holding her down in this awful place. Damn it, woman, stop squirming around, Alvin growled. Alvin, Vera said, looking down. Who do you think that was? What's happening? Don't have time to tell you. Just reach up and see if you can grab the rail above you. Vera looked up. It's pretty high. Then stand on my shoulders. I'm afraid I'll fall. Damn it, Vera. This contraption may be shut down, but these blades are still sharp, and one's cutting into my boot. You gotta try to get up there so you can pull me out too. Okay, I'll try. Good girl. Slowly and carefully, Vera climbed up on top of Alvin's shoulders and reached the rail. I've got it. Now what? Climb out. Don't yell at me. Then don't ask such silly questions. It took every ounce of strength Vera had, but plus Alvin pushing up on her feet for her to get out of the pit. Great, Alvin said. Now, how about you go get me some help before I bleed to death? Why can't I help you? Because I weigh twice as much what you do. Now, get somebody to help me get out of here. Vera humped, but did as she was told. In 5 minutes, she had rounded up 3 men from maintenance, and they had pulled Alvin out. The paramedics whisked them both to the hospital. Vera had some bumps and bruises, and Alvin had a severely lacerated foot, but was expected to recover in a few weeks. Within days, Vera was back on the job. See? So I see your hero is still milking his so-called injury for as long as possible, Jean said, stacking her books. Shut up, Jean, Vera fired back. Alvin is a hero. He saved my life, and not only that, but he also told me who it was who ordered him to take the trash cart. I fell into the shredder. I wondered if the authorities would like to have a little word with you about attempted homicide. But there's no proof. You wouldn't, Jean stammered. Wait and see, Vera said. And while you're waiting, don't speak to me again unless you have something positive to say. Vera went back to her side of the machine. The two women never spoke again. I don't know which ending do you like the best. The best. I think this is number 5. Number 5. Let's see. Drinking game. I've never taken a selfie while eating pizza. I sat staring across the table at the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She reached for her glass and swallowed some of the amber-colored liquid. I smiled, hoping that the alcohol was increasing my chances of getting to know my beautiful captor more intimately. I never ratted out an international crime syndicate. I swallowed hard before the glass met my lips, then swallowed again. Well, that was uncalled for, I thought. How about we stay away from sensitive subjects, I said. I'm sorry too soon, she said. No, I just don't like to think about what would happen if they ever found me. She smiled. I guess it's a good thing. The government assigned me to protect you. I seized the opportunity. I've never had such a beautiful FBI agent have an interest in my body. Her eyes held my gaze long and hard until I looked away. What I meant to say was, oh, I knew what you meant, she said as she raised her glass again. Really? The nights can get very lonely in the witness protection program. you agreed to it. In my line of work, you have to keep things fresh. I bet it's getting pretty boring. It's not boredom, it's just repetition. Don't you stay with your clients for long, only as long as they're alive. So, how many assignments have you had in the last year? Her face showed a mixture of pity and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. More than you'd like to know. My eyes lit up with recognition. I tried to hide the fear behind them. Time to go broke. I never made love to my bodyguard. Again, her glass tipped. I couldn't tell if she was toying with me or not. I've never won the lottery, she said. I raised an eyebrow. That was an odd topic shift. Okay, I've never had a sudden windfall of money. She emptied her glass and poured another. Where is she going with this? I've never refused a bribe, she said with an odd intensity that sent chills down my spine. Oh no. My eyes went wide as my glass went up. I've never fallen victim to corruption. She swallowed, showing no sign of being drunk, and leered at me like a predator eyeing helpless prey. I've never been an FBI agent. A drop of sweat formed on my forehead as my glass started shaking uncontrollably, spilling the contents. I've never assumed someone's identity to get close to a witness and assignment before. Witness and assassinate him. I've never assumed someone's identity to get close to a witness and assassinate him. The edge of her mouth twitched upward as a gun appeared in her hand, and she touched the rim of the glass to her mouth. To her mouth. Trustworthy. Time of death, 3:15 p.m. Dr. Seven wrote on the patient's chart. He scribbled a few more notes, turned off the heart monitor, then quietly stepped up to the man sleeping in the chair. Mr. Harlson, he said softly. Stephen Harlson, he repeated, gently nudging the man. Doctor, Stephen said. Dr. Seven placed his hand on Stephen's shoulder. I'm so sorry, he started. Sorry, Stephen said, rubbing his eyes. My wife, is she? I wish I could say that everything was fine and she will be going home tomorrow, but unfortunately. Steve's eyes darted to the silent monitors and the still body lying in the hospital bed. He stood and gently laid his hand in his wife's and stroked her hair and caressed her cheek. What happened? I thought the surgery was successful. I thought so too, said the doctor. All indications were that things went smoothly. I expected her to recover within days with flying colors. Steve leaned over, kissed her cheek, and whispered in her ear. His body began to shake with silent sobs as he held her face. I love you, Amanda Jane, he said, through stream of tears. Dr. Seven put his arm around Steve, allowing him to cry on his shoulder. For 10 minutes, they stayed there. Steve sobbing and Dr. Seven allowing him to do so without a hint of protest. I wish I could go back and fix whatever went wrong, the doctor said. The problem is, I would have done everything exactly the same. It seemed like a textbook operation. Stephen sniffed and rubbed his eyes with his sleeve. What do I tell the kids? Tell them that their mother fought bravely, but in the end she was too sick to recover. I'm not sure if they'll understand. Tell them that Mommy will be watching over them from heaven. Tears flowed down Steve's cheek. And what do I tell myself? That you were married to a brave, beautiful woman who was taken from you too soon. The doctor she said, seeing the doctor still hugging Stephen. "How can I help you, nurse?" the doctor said, releasing Stephen. "You're needed at the nurse's station," she said. The doctor turned to Stephen. "Will you be okay?" "I don't know." The doctor reached in his pocket and handed Steve a card. "This is my personal cell phone. If you need to talk anytime, give me a call. Unless I'm in surgery, I'll pick up." Stephen hugged him again. "Thank you so much. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this, but you've given me a good start." The doctor smiled. "Give those kids a hug for me." "I will," Stephen said. "They're going to need all the hugs they can get." The doctor stepped out of the room, leaving the grieving husband and the teary-eyed nurse. A short time later, as Dr. Savin was working at a computer at the nurse's station, he heard a familiar voice. "Excuse me, doctor," said the young nurse. "Mrs. Harleson's room." "Oh, yes, what can I do for you?" he said. I looked at Mrs. Harleson's chart and it said the cause of death is COVID-19. "Really?" the doctor said, taking the chart. "There must be some mistake. One of the nurses must have gotten confused. But the handwriting looks the same as the rest of it. Aren't doctors the only ones who can write on the charts?" "Quite correct, but this is clearly a mistake. I'll get this corrected right away," the doctor said. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention." The nurse smiled and resumed her normal rounds. One of the nurses at the station picked up the chart. "I'll get another sheet so you can correct it, sir," the nurse said. "That's very kind of you." He left the nurse's station, went to his office, and locked the door behind him. Then he collapsed into his chair and threw the chart onto the desk and the blank paper in the trash can. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket, hit a special button, and dialed a number. "Yes," a man answered on the second ring. "I have another COVID death to add to my numbers." "Did the patient actually die of COVID?" The doctor hesitated. "No," he said. "She died of complications from heart surgery, which would be explained away as possible COVID-19. Absolutely." "Excellent. You're well above your quota for the week." "Thank you, sir. Since you're so far ahead, the hospital will receive full funding and you will pocket a handsome bonus." "Oh, thank you very much, sir. Since you're so far ahead, the hospital will also..." And he paused. "Thank you very much, sir. Keep this up and you might make chief of staff." "I'll do my best, sir. Make sure we have a copy of the original diagnosis along with the modified one." Dr. Savin hesitated. His eyes fell on the certain book on his shelf entitled Medical Ethics. "Is there a problem?" I've never been comfortable with that part of the process. Won't it show that I altered paperwork?" The line was silent for a long moment. "You trust us, don't you?" "Of course," Dr. Savin said quickly. "I'm just saying that if it were to fall into the wrong hands, I'd have a lot to answer for. Falsifying documents cost me my practice." "Do you think we would let that happen to one of our most trustworthy doctors?" "No, sir." "Good. Then send the paperwork as requested." "Yes, sir." The phone disconnected. The doctor set his cell phone down on the desk and stared at it for a long time. Last night, I wake. My eyes won't open. What the hell? I feel strange, warm and fevery. Is that even a word? Now my eyes flutter open. I'm laying on the front lawn. That must have been some party. How much did I drink last night? I'm getting up on unsteady feet. Wonder how long I kneeled before the porcelain throne. Ah, there's my neighbor whispers, "Whose is it? Why didn't they go to the hospital instead of back the hall? Is somebody bleeding in my bed?" I pass the bathroom and get a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. My body trudges past, but my mind freezes. The horrible image for me to see. Kevin is sitting in the toilet, leaning against the wall, unmoving. He's covered in blood. "No!" I scream with every bit of motherly pain inside me, but all that escapes my lips is a low moan. "Kevin, my baby." I push, pull, punch, and kick in my body to regain control. All of my efforts yield only a brief pause when I proceed towards the bedrooms. "It's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real," I chant over and over again. "It's a dream, just a drunken stupor. I can wake up, I can wake up." I turn into the master bedroom and everything falls horribly into place. There is a full-length mirror hanging on the wall. For the first time today, I'm able to see myself. I pause in front of the mirror, wanting to see, but wanting to turn away at the same time. My hair is a matted mess. Dried blood covers my mouth. My shirt is ripped nearly in half, exposing my left breast. But the most chilling sight is this large bite mark on my shoulder that radiates brilliant purple. The infection spreads in dark veins outward from the bite. My eyes are glazed and red. No, no, no. My body tenses. It turns slowly as though finished with this moment of introspection. How can this be? I don't remember anything. Wait, maybe I think back to before this horrible tragedy. Our neighbor Bob told us people were attacking each other in the streets. Jeff thanked him and told him to take the kids inside. Our stupid cat ran outside and Alice chased after it. I caught her and told her to run to Daddy. That's when it happened. Our doctor grabbed me. He tore my shirt. I whipped around and sank my knee into his groin. He didn't react at all. His blood-stained teeth lunged at me incredibly fast for a man in his 60s. I screamed as his teeth sunk into my shoulder. Jeff screamed while covering Kevin in Alice's eyes. "Get them inside. Keep them safe," I screamed at him. He hesitated. "Go." The infection took hold and I dropped to my knees. He disappeared into the house as the light faded from my eyes. I approached the closet door and ripped it open. Jeff and Alice sit huddled together. I lunge at them. Jeff grabs me and shoves me back. Mary yells, "Please don't do this. Come on, baby. Aren't you in there somewhere?" "Yes," I scream back, trying with supreme effort to hold my body back. I lunge at him again. He steps aside and I tumble to the floor. Alice screams. My head whips around and I crawl towards her. "No, you can't have her." I scream, pulling back on my body's invisible reins. It pauses just for an instant. Jeff uses the moment. "Alice, run to your room and lock the door. Do not come out until I come get you." Alice jumps up and runs. I hear her door slam. I get to my feet and turn towards Jeff. He's holding my gun that he bought me a few years ago. It's small. .380 automatic. "Please, Mary, don't make me do this. Give me some sign you're in there," he pleads, pointing the gun at me. "I'm here, baby. I love you, but you need to do it. You need to release me from this hell." He hesitates as I shuffle closer. I see the gun tremble. Dear God, he's not going to do it. I'm going to kill him, Alice, and who knows how many more. I'm almost within reach when I see a single tear escape Jeff's eye and roll down to his cheek. "I'm sorry, baby." curiosity became insatiable. I took a walk out into the field and approached the tree. As I walked up to it, I could see a circle around it where the grass was being blown, exactly like the tree. It was the strangest thing. One section of grass completely unmoving, and right next to it, the grass was waving in the breeze. I reached out with my hand to feel through the invisible threshold. When I did, I could feel a gentle breeze blowing. I stepped through the invisible barrier and immediately the wind stopped. As I approached the tree, something crunched under my feet. I had to push aside the grass to see what it was. It was a bone. As I pushed away some more grass, I could see it was an entire skeleton. It seemed to be about the size and shape of a rabbit. It didn't strike me as odd until I got closer to the tree and crunched some more bones underfoot. I looked through it was definitely a deer skeleton. When I came across the third set of bones is when I started to feel uneasy. This set was much larger. The best guess was it was a full-grown bear. The bones were completely stripped. There wasn't an ounce of meat on them. They were completely white, and they didn't seem like they had decayed. I stepped out into the tree trunk and saw a bare spot. It looked like a tree limb had been there once, but now it was a smooth, round spot. There was no bark on that spot, and I could see the rings in the wood like you would see if it would be chopped down. I felt compelled to reach up and touch it. Surprisingly, it felt warm. As I kept my hand there, I could feel a slight pulsing. It made me feel good. It made me feel sleepy. I decided that I had found out everything I needed to know about this tree. So I tried to remove my hand, but I couldn't. It was stuck fast. Must be some sap, I thought. Even though my hand didn't feel wet, I struggled to pull my hand away, but I could not. I picked up a piece of a tree branch that was laying on the ground and tried to get it under my palm to pry it free from that tree. That's when the strangest thing happened. When I stuffed the stick into the smooth spot, it felt like something had lashed me across the back with something. I turned, but nothing was there. So I tried to pry my hand free, and once again I felt a lash across my back. I whipped around, still nothing. It was time to try something different. I turned my back to the tree so I could see what was coming, then pried with the stick. I was astonished to see a tree branch whipping toward me. One of the branches had reached down and used the whip-like end of its branch to strike me. I was stunned more than hurt. What the hell? I yelled. I looked all around to see if somebody was playing some elaborate joke on me, but there was no one I could see. To be certain, I jabbed the stick to the tree again. Sure enough, here came the tree branch whipping through the air, aiming right at my face. I ducked in the nick of time. Not an easy task with my hand still stuck to the tree. My mind was racing a mile a minute when my eyes settled on one of the piles of bones, and I realized what was happening. My hand was not stuck to the tree by accident. sawed through the limb. It took a bit of guilty pleasure as the tree emitted another scream. I leaped up, ran past the invisible barrier, and did not stop to look back until I got home. Only when I was standing at my doorway, exhausted, lungs burning, did I look back at the tree. The wind was blowing through the branches, but the tree seemed to be moving more agitated than before. I stepped inside the safety of my house, knowing that I would never forget this insane experience. I wondered for a moment if it had been real or if I had daydreamed it. As I looked down at my hand covered in blood and sap, I no longer doubted. Days after my ordeal, I summoned up the courage to walk to the end of the field. I looked at the tree with my binoculars. It was still waving in the wind. There was something leaking from the hollow place where the hand had been. Before I would have called it sap. Now I'm not sure what to call it. It didn't have any amber color. It was red. Did I ever approach the tree again? No. I built a fence around the perimeter of the waving grass so that nothing would get close to it. Did I take satisfaction knowing that it could no longer feed on the unwary? Absolutely. I looked forward to watch it starve to death. At times in the middle of summer when I'm mowing my lawn, I felt a sudden cold wind. I stopped and watched the tree. I knew it was watching me, waiting for the chance at revenge. It's been a year since my narrow escape with the tree. I started noticing saplings in the field. At first I ignored them, but then I saw that they were all in a line, leading from the tree straight towards my house. I bushwhacked them all. I drove right up to the fence. When I did it to show the tree that I had destroyed its young, an acorn flew at me, missing my face by inches. I quickly turned and retreated. The barrage continued with a few hitting me in the back until I was to the yard and out of range. I remained vigilant. I watched for no new saplings and destroyed them as soon as they appeared. It became an obsession. I purchased a few sticks of dynamite just in case. I knew I should have destroyed this abomination, but I would rather watch it starve to death. Its leaves don't grow on all the limbs anymore. It looks like some of the branches are dead. 2 years later, I think it's done. The tree had no buds on it in spring. It's the middle of summer and there's only a single leaf on the one branch. On one hand, I feel relieved. On the other, I feel sadness for this unique creature, even though it tried to kill me as I walked through the yard towards the house. I felt a cold breeze. I glanced over to the edge of the yard, and I see a young tree 15 feet tall. It's moving slightly as if blown by a gentle breeze. He waits. Blood flies as the ground rushes up to my feet. Every bit of air is forced appreciate that very much, and I didn't want to die in jail. And still, he sat there, unblinking, unmoving, like some horrible piece of statue that someone sat on a tree limb, like a gargoyle that guards the old Gothic church's eyes always open, unblinking, blink. There were times when I even mused whether he was alive or if he had expired and continued to sit there and haunt me. I called the exterminator and finally convinced him that I'm not crazy. He scheduled an appointment to come and take care of my problem. I sat back and relaxed for the first time since I had returned from the hospital. The scheduled day came. I looked out of the window and smiled at my tormentor. Sat there oblivious to his impending doom. An hour later, a doorbell rang. I answered the door in great anticipation. "So where's the buzzard you wanted me to get rid of?" the exterminator said. "He's right there." I pointed towards a tree, but the branch was empty. No, he was there. I saw him this morning, not an hour ago. Right, the exterminator said. "Well, let me know if you want me to chase off any more of your imaginary pests." He turned off and stormed off, mumbling something about old people and memories. I walked out into the yard and searched. Nothing. I searched the sky, but he wasn't circling either. He was gone. That night I slept uneasily.